All right. Well, let's begin then. Hi, everyone. I'm Councillor Glen, and it is noon on Thursday. What's today? The 15th of July. Welcome to this edition of our virtual councillor chat. I'm joined by Jordan Moffat from my office. Hello, Jordan.
Hello, Glenn and everybody.
As always, appreciate your help, Jordan, to moderate our questions coming in. So you are watching the Zoom chat and the Zoom Q&A, as well as the Facebook comments for any questions from residents.
That's right. I have a multi-monitor setup here. I got the Facebook here. I got the Q&A here, the chat here. Everything's all set up.
Okay, perfect. So if you are watching, there's a few ways that you can participate today if you have a question. If you're on Facebook, just type your question into the comments underneath the video. If you are on Zoom, there's two ways. The easiest way is to use the Q&A panel. You'll see that at the bottom of your screen. It's Q&A, and you can type in your question. And Jordan will ask it on your behalf. Or if you actually want to speak and say the question yourself, like a call-in radio show, raise your hand and we can bring you in live on audio to ask your questions. So making the most of our technology here. I have a few notes I wanted to share just before we get going and try to get some questions coming in, and looking forward to today. We've done, I think this is our third or fourth virtual councillor chat, and I really enjoy the range of questions that come in, but I'm also looking forward to someday we can get back to doing these in local parks or at local coffee shops or local patios, and hopefully those days are coming soon. First thing I wanted to mention, it's July 15th, Thursday, July 15th, and this evening is the second annual Stittsville Front Porch Concert Series. There's a great interview with Sarah Blakely, the organizer, on CBC this morning, where she was talking about how this idea came about last year and the success last year and how this has grown even more this year. I think there's like 30 or perhaps getting close to 40 homes that have signed up, and they're going to have different musicians, bands and ensembles and solo performers at porches all over Stittsville. So I hope everybody gets a chance to get out on your bike or walk around your neighborhood, excuse me. If you Google Stittsville Front Porch Concerts, you'll come up with the map of all the concert locations. There's also a Facebook page, and there's a map just with little dots on it showing all the locations. So you could sort of plot out and be strategic and catch as many live acts as you can. So thank you, Sarah, for organizing that, and really looking forward to lots of music in our Stittsville community this evening. I also want to just talk about some of the frequently asked questions we get into our office. One of them these days is certainly blasting. There is ongoing blasting primarily in the Shea Village area. This is near Shea and Fernbank. They've actually finished the blasting for the homes in that area. What they're focusing on now is they're blasting to install a new sewer. Eventually it's going to connect kind of from Robert Grant all the way over to Liard Street. There's an old pumping station there, and that'll be decommissioned. But anyhow, the blasting for the homes went on quite a bit longer than anticipated, and now they've moved on to blasting for the sewer. There's still a few more weeks of that coming. And, you know, it's one of the realities of living in Stittsville right now. There's still quite a bit of land to be developed along that south part of Stittsville, just north of Fernbank Road. And so while we will get a pause to the blasting eventually, over the next 5 or 10 years, there will be periods, there will be weeks where we're going to continue to have this blasting. It's frustrating for me as a councillor because we don't have a lot of regulatory oversight on this. The blasting is following provincial and federal rules rather than municipal. I've got another meeting with city staff next week on this. There's a few things that I think could be improved in Stittsville. One is around notification, the radius of homes that get notified about blasting. The other thing I'd like to see is an actual central registry, a listing on the city's website of all of the blasting operations in the neighborhood, so that when you hear a blast, you could find out where is there a blasting site nearby. We've certainly got that construction site on near Fernbank and Shea. Earlier this year, we had some blasting happening at Hazeldean and Victor. There's a quarry across the Queensway along Richardson Side Road, just north of Stittsville. and they do blasting almost every day around noontime. So there's a lot of different sources of blasting, and I think it would help just to have a one-stop shop for that information. And the other thing I wonder, all of the blasting operations, they're required to measure the seismic impact, to do measurements of how strong the shaking and vibrations are. So I wonder if any of that data could be shared live or somehow be shared publicly as well. So these are the few ideas I had. But I know blasting, it's frustrating. I can feel it often at my house during the day. So many of us are working from home now, so it's more disruptive even than it has been in the past. And I'm hoping we can find some ways to make that a little easier to bear in the coming months and years. The other frequently asked question is around utility work, Bell and Rogers. They are cutting into the ground primarily in the Wildwood and the Crossing Bridge subdivision right now, but they've been in a lot of subdivisions already, Fairwinds and Bryanston Gate and Jackson Trails and so on. And they're sort of Bell and Rogers making their way through every community and upgrading to fiber. But along with that comes a lot of disruption from the construction work. And I guess I want to convey a couple things. First of all, they are required to return your driveway and your lawn to the original condition. And they do document that. Bell, I know, uses video recording, and they go out and they take a recording of all of the landscaping before they begin. And their contractors are required to put it back in place. I know there's some people who had sprinklers in the right of way in front of their home that have been damaged, and Bell has paid for replacement of those. But even if they are replacing them, obviously it's a big disruption if your sprinkler gets cut or your internet gets cut. I've met with city staff on this. I had another call with Bell yesterday, actually, and I think there's a lot that Bell needs to improve, in particular on how they communicate with residents on these projects. I think the city has a lot to do to educate residents on right-of-way. That's part of my job as well, is the right-of-way, those first few feet or meters at the front of your property are a city right-of-way. So it is where a lot of the utilities are placed already, your gas lines and phone lines and so on. And now these fiber lines are there. So they are permitted to do that work, but I just want to make sure that the work is being monitored properly, that driveways and grass and lawn and landscaping is being restored properly. And most importantly, that residents know who to go to at Bell when they have an issue. And if Bell is not resolving it, that there are inspectors at the city who can help as well. So if any of this resonates for you and you're someone who has questions about the utility work, or you've had issues with Bell or Rogers, contact my office. I'd be happy to help connect you with the right people, either with Bell or Rogers or at the city level, and to help you navigate that and hopefully get your property back to the shape that it was before all this started. Jordan, I have some more updates, but I don't want to I don't want to miss out on any questions. Are there any questions yet coming in from viewers?
No, there are no questions yet. So I'd keep going with your updates if you have them.
Okay, I will then. A quick one, if you haven't already seen it, along Stittsville Main Street at the entrance to the Wildwood community, the new sign is finally finished. So big thanks to the Nautical Lands Group and to Stittsville Glass and Signs for their assistance. And we're going to do a community photo op in the coming weeks as well. So it looks great, and really happy to see that done after many COVID-related delays over the last year and a half or so. Let's see. Oh, I shared something on my blog earlier this week about the Huntmar and Maple Grove intersection. So this intersection is being upgraded in 2022. We're hoping to get it in 2021, but again, COVID construction issues have pushed that to 2022. But it's an upgrade of the Huntmar Maple Grove intersection. It'll have 2 lanes, or turning lanes in each direction. It'll have, it's a protected intersection, the first of its kind in Stittsville. We have a few of them in other parts of Ottawa, but a really significant upgrade to improve not only the flow of traffic, but more importantly, the safety for cyclists and pedestrians and all other users. Related to that, the city's also kicked off the EA, the environmental assessment process, for future upgrades to Stittsville Main Street and Huntmar. So this is Stittsville Main Street, where it will continue north of Maple Grove and eventually connect up to basically to Palladium Drive and the highway. And then Huntmar north of Maple Grove, heading up to, I believe, as far as Tanger Outlet. So I'll be sharing more information about that process and how you can get involved if you're interested pretty soon. Staying in that same general area, 1849 Maple Grove. This is a piece of land owned by Mattamy, and they are currently going through the review and approval process for a townhome development. Now, there's an old stone house. There's actually two old stone houses on that site that are being kept and renovated and will become part of the new development. But there's also a larger old estate house. It actually used to be home to Faces magazine. It was their production offices up until a few years ago. A very large old home on the site, not in very good condition. They've applied for and have received the demolition permit to take down that building. So that'll probably be happening in the next week or two. But just to reiterate, the heritage stone buildings are not being demolished. They are staying where they are and they are being preserved, which is really good news. On heritage, also shared an update today on my website about Bradley Craig Barn and some of the ongoing restoration work that's being done there. The barn and the farmstead is owned by Richcraft. And although a few years ago they had a plan to move the barn to Saunders Farm out of Munster, they're no longer planning to do that. And they are investing a significant amount of money to renovate the barn and now the farmhouse. So the city's issued a number of heritage permits to allow them to complete that work. It involves foundation repairs on the barn and the farmhouse. It involves replacement of the wood cladding on the barn itself. Some of it's in very poor condition. Removal of some of the secondary buildings that don't form part of the heritage designation. So I've shared some information on my website, but I'm sure you've seen the construction work there. I had a visit in early April, and the quality of the craftsmanship on this restoration is incredible. I don't know how much Richcraft is spending. They don't have to disclose that, but based on the scale of the work and the quality of the work, it's pretty clear they've put a tremendous amount of investment. They're planning to incorporate it into a future mixed-use commercial development along Hazeldean Road. So that's really good news. Incorporating both the farmhouse and the barn, renovating those, and for adaptive reuse is what we call it. So that's really good to see. Jordan, I'll pause and take a little sip of water. Do you have any questions coming in from residents?
I'll say this as slow as I can to give you enough of a break. No, we don't have any questions just yet.
Okay.
But I encourage people, this is an open Q&A. You can ask the counselor anything you want to about Stittsville. And, well, he's going to answer it.
This is the first time we've done a counselor chat over the noon hour. And we're always saying, well, what would be the best time to do this? Usually we do these at 7 p.m. and we have a ton of questions. So perhaps we will learn from this new time slot that the evening time slot's more popular. But I have lots of
I was wondering if people would check their Facebook during their lunch break, you know?
Yep, for sure, for sure. I have lots I could update on, but I don't want to. Let's see. I'm looking through my notes. Those are the most important ones. I was going to talk about OC Transpo. If you live in Fernbank, routes 167 and 252, they're going to have some slight rerouting starting this fall. And it's because more of the roads are complete, like Cope. So previously, the buses had to kind of do a bit of a labyrinth route through part of the Fernbank community because not all of the roads were done yet or handed over to the city. They have to be paved and finished and inspected and accepted by the city before we send buses down them. So with more and more roads in Fernbank being complete, we've got some more efficient routes for the 167 and the 252. It'll bring those buses closer to where people live and just make it a shorter, more convenient bus ride. I haven't posted that to the website yet, so we'll have to get that up soon. And we also heard from OC Transpo, I believe there's 4 or 5 new bus shelters and bus paths that are being constructed in Stittsville. So it'll make that wait for a bus a little more convenient, some more protection from the elements, and safer as well. So every year, OC upgrades a certain number of stops over the city, and piece by piece, we get to improve the bus infrastructure here in the community. I'm taking another sip, Jordan. Any questions coming in?
No questions. Do you want to shift to some citywide issues at City Hall?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. We usually focus on local things in this chat, but there's been a lot of big files at City Hall over the last few weeks. So yeah, do you have a list there of some of the top items?
I have a list right here. There's a lot of big stuff. Let's start with one of the biggest projects in the city, both currently and for the next little while, the Civic Hospital redevelopment.
Yeah.
Dow's Lake.
So actually, I was on the site yesterday meeting with the architects, Graham Bird Architects, very well-known Ottawa firm, and the hospital team from the Ottawa Hospital. So the Ottawa Civic Hospital right now, I think many people will know where that's situated on Carling Avenue. In 2028, they are aiming to open a brand new central hospital for Ottawa. This is a $2 billion project, so a massive civic project, and probably the most significant civic project in the next decade. I was on site yesterday just doing a walkabout with the architect and the hospital team, along with several of my council colleagues, and just trying to get a better understanding of the context of the site and the complexities of the site and some of the restraints they're working under and how they're prioritizing issues like transportation and mobility and accessibility. It's a pretty exciting project. And I know one of the questions that's often come up is why that location? And a lot of people have said we should move it to another location. You know, I think it was 5 or 6 years ago now that there was a big controversy and the federal government got involved as to the location. Tunney's Pasture was an option. Experimental Farm was an option. They ended up on this one because of the location and the size of the site. And, you know, I really don't see that debate about location of the hospital changing anytime soon. That it is where it is. They're moving forward on it. They have an architectural plan. They have a design plan. They're going through a city approval process. They're getting funding from the provincial government. It's going to be where it is near Dow's Lake on Carling. And right now it's going through a process with the city to evaluate their architectural plans, their transportation plans. It's a site plan approval. So there's, yeah, I think some tweaks to be made and better understand how it integrates with transit and the local road network. But I think they're certainly on the right track, but it's going to be something we're talking a lot about as a city, not just like our municipality, not just our city of Ottawa, but just everybody in our city. You're going to be hearing a lot about this Civic Hospital project over the next few years. Pretty exciting stuff. And a big improvement over the existing Civic. Civic Hospital is about 100 years old, so this will be a very modern facility. It's a regional hospital. I think that's something I learned yesterday as well. Just it'll serve on an emergency basis, you know, people from as far away as Baffin Island, for example. So it's a very significant health facility for Eastern Ontario, not just Ottawa itself.
Okay, another issue that's been in the news recently is the Lansdowne Park, but specifically the north side stands of Lansdowne Park and the Civic. We just talked about the Civic Hospital and now the Civic Arena below the north side stands.
Yeah, I'm part of the Lansdowne Park Sponsors Group, City Councillor Group, and we're working with city staff on a strategy to just ensure the long-term viability of Lansdowne Park. The stadium and arena at Lansdowne are owned by the City of Ottawa. They are in horrible shape right now. I used to work for the Ottawa 67s back in the early 2000s, nearly 20 years ago. And the arena and the stands were in pretty poor shape back then, and they've deteriorated even further. So they're going to need replaced. They just don't meet modern accessibility requirements. They don't meet modern requirements for sports arenas or for concert venues. And so at our finance committee a couple weeks back, I guess, we had a long discussion, heard from a lot of public delegations, a lot of questions and concerns and ideas, but we've asked staff to put together a business case for how we could redevelop the north side stands and the Ottawa Civic Centre. Could involve a housing component, could involve affordable housing, but how do we do this? How do we make this investment and do it at a way that is of minimal cost to Ottawa taxpayers? it needs to be done, but we don't want to be spending tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars as a city. We want to do this in a responsible way. So it's going to be, again, something we'll hear about a lot. If the Civic Hospital was the biggest civic project in the next decade, I'd say Lansdowne Park might be number 2 on that list of important civic projects. So it'll be one we'll be watching over the next few years.
Okay, we just talked about healthcare. We just talked about recreation / housing at Lansdowne. Transit, the big line item in transit recently has been the announcement of a purchase of and the transition into electric buses. So electrifying the fleet of OC Transpo over a phased approach over the next decade or so. Why don't you talk about that?
Yes, so we are in a climate emergency here in the city of Ottawa and lost my screen there. City of Ottawa and planet Earth in general in a climate emergency. One of the keys to that is to get to zero emissions in the city's bus fleet. As much as we're investing in light rail, we will always have a need for buses in our community. And so thanks to investment and financial support from the federal government through Infrastructure Canada, we're going to be able to replace nearly our entire bus fleet. That's nearly 1,000 buses over the next 10 to 15 years with e-buses. So we're moving ahead on a procurement plan. So every year we will replace more and more of that fleet. I believe the first ones would be purchased, is it 2022 or 2023? Anyhow, within the next couple of years. But something that came up last week at council is the city's Auditor General has decided she's going to do an audit of the procurement plans and the potential risk around that. And I spoke up at council and I said, what a welcome role for the Auditor General to play. Traditionally at the city, we have an Auditor General. It's an independent officer who reviews projects and procurements and processes, usually after they've happened. And in the private sector, and I come from a company that did a lot of work in this world. In the private sector, the auditing teams, the audit function is often now involved from the get-go in projects to advise board members and executives on potential risk and how to manage that risk effectively. Any project of this size is going to have risk. That's okay. It's a matter of understanding what the risks are, what we're comfortable with, and how the risks can be mitigated. So before we agree to any purchase, the Auditor General is going to be giving us some recommendations and some advice on what is appropriate risk and whether or not staff have considered all the factors related to that. So a really welcome role for the Auditor General, Natalie Goujon, and I hope she continues to play that proactive role in other large city projects. We've got some, obviously, phase 3 of light rail that we'll be looking at soon. Lansdowne Park is another one that'll come up soon. So anytime we have these large, complex projects, I think it's a great role for the Auditor General to play. We have a great resources in that office, so we should be taking advantage of that whenever we can.
It's July, so we're about 6 months out from the 2021 budget process.
Yes.
Which means we're about 6 months to the next budget 2022, and some preliminary directions are already starting being made. Do you want to talk about budget 2022 and what folks can expect?
Yeah, it's not the most exciting topic, but looking at what we're planning for 2022 for the city budget, we gave direction to the finance department to start drafting a budget based on what we've seen for really the past 5 or 6 years, which is an increase, an inflationary increase of about 3% on the city budget for your property taxes. I think the thing that's going to cause the most controversy between now and the fall is around the police budget. The police budget has a 3% budgetary increase targeted. And I know there's a lot of people in the community who like to see that at a 0% increase or even a decrease in the budget. The 3% basically is to meet the negotiated salary increases for the most part for police officers. So if we were to go to 0%, you'd actually have to probably cut staff from police, and it's a tough balance because I know I hear from a lot of people in our community they'd like to see more police presence in our community, whether it's around traffic enforcement or otherwise. But I also appreciate there's I think a very strong push, and I agree with it, that we need to start to look at how do we reimagine, reform, change how police operate and what they focus on. I supported a motion from Councillor Cloutier at our finance committee meeting and ended up failing, but it was to say, hey, if you can get in closer to 0%, we would like to spend that money that's been saved on mental health initiatives in the community. So I think that's a good way to nudge the police and the police board who set that budget, and also just say, hey, we need to be funding mental health as well. Coming out of this pandemic, this is going to be a real, it is a real crisis already that we have to tackle around mental health resources for people in our community. So I think that would be a wise way to spend any surplus money that might come our way through rebudgeting and other exercises like that.
I got one more. These were rapid fire questions, but they're kind of slow burn questions. The other thing in the city news recently was we have a new interprovincial crossing, the Prince of Wales Bridge. No longer, it's now the Chief William Commanda Bridge that goes across the Ottawa River from basically Bayview Station over the Lemieux Island, I believe, to Quebec.
Well, it's certainly nice to see that bridge will have some use for cyclists and pedestrians, and I hear it's going to be open for cross-country skiing. I know a lot of people from Stittsville do take advantage of the parkways that have been open during the pandemic and on Sundays and everything. It certainly would be nice to see some investment from the provincial or federal government in infrastructure like that out here in Stittsville. You know, wouldn't it be nice to have a pedestrian bridge connecting Canadian Tire Center to Tanger Outlets, for example, but hopefully that'll come soon as well. Also good with the renaming of the bridge to recognize an Indigenous leader in our community, and another gesture or action of reconciliation. Maybe I could use that just to mention, we are planning to do a workshop or a webinar for the community about Indigenous issues and about reconciliation and what that means for our community here in Stittsville. So that's something we're hoping to put together towards the end of the summer. So stay tuned for that as well.
Those are the questions I had.
All right.
No new resident questions to ask. Looking on the website to see anything else that you have updates on, and you can give us an update on the Pioneer Plains splash pad.
Yeah, so Pioneer Plains splash pad, Jackson Trails, it hasn't been working for several years now. And every time the city goes in to repair it, they find something worse. It is going to be completely replaced for next spring. The pipes have deteriorated significantly, and it needs to be replaced. They could keep putting duct tape Band-Aid solutions on it, but it's really a temporary solution. So we're going to make the investment and replace it. In the meantime, they have been able to salvage part of the apparatus this year. So there is a bit of water coming through, still not to where anyone would like it to be, but it is something for this year, and then it will be ready to go for next year, thankfully.
Some other infrastructure projects in Stittsville for active transportation. We just had that big survey. This was probably covered in the last councillor chat about active transportation and missing links. Yeah. Folks may have noticed the construction of a PXO, a pedestrian crossover at Orville and Stittsville Main Street, and there are a couple more planned. Do you want to talk about pedestrian crossovers?
Yeah, so we have traffic counts and requests in for budgets and so on in a number of locations across Stittsville for pedestrian crossovers. There's one that is actually qualified for federal funding on Brightside and Hopetown, just east of Guardian Angel School. Now I wanted to say well, it was supposed to happen end of August, early September. We have received a petition from residents and some resident emails and concerns. So if there's any folks from that area tuning in, we've put that on pause. we put that on pause. Although the pedestrian count came back really, really high at 150 people in a single day. Like, it's a very high number, and it certainly met the requirements of 100 people. Some residents have some questions and concerns, so we're putting it on pause. I believe we are going to do another pedestrian count in September, and want to have some more discussions with the community. You know, this is the paths in question are very well used. 150 people in a day using them is one of the most used paths in our community. And it's a route that a lot of school kids take to get home from Guardian Angels or even West Wind Public. These pathways were built, I'm going to say 15 years ago, when that whole West Wind subdivision was built. And compared to what the code is today around accessibility, they are really not up to scratch. The curbs, for example, are too steep. The pathway itself is quite narrow. They certainly would not be built like that today. And the funding from the federal government is about improving active transportation and safety. And the city's focused on a number of qualifying pathways near school zones. And this is one of the locations. So the idea is to add an accessible pad at the end of the pathway so that people with wheelchairs, mobility issues, visual impairments can safely use that crossing point. I appreciate there's some resident concerns, and we're happy to meet with people and try to share some more information. And we'll be reaching out and responding to the petition, maybe not tomorrow, but certainly early next week if we don't get to that tomorrow, and holding some more conversations with the community and just trying to explain the difference that some of these accessibility upgrades would make. If you go to new neighborhoods, you'll see sidewalks right now have these metal tactile indicators. They're called TWSI, TWSI, tactile walking surface indicators. And they really do make a big difference for improving accessibility for people who need that in our community. And there's a lot of people who do, older adults, people who use wheelchairs, people who use mobility aids, and visually impaired. So anytime we build a new sidewalk or crosswalk, we upgrade to that latest and greatest standard. And whenever we can, whenever we have money available or reconstruction or grants from the province or the federal government, we try to retroactively upgrade pathways and sidewalks and crossings in other communities as well. So more to come, but stay tuned on that one.
PXOs and TWSIs is the lingo.
PXO, pedestrian crosswalk, TWSI, tactile walking surface indicator. Tactile walking surface indicator. We'll put that on the final exam.
And active transportation, walking, cycling, any type of rolling, that's small or non-motorized, basically.
Yeah, things that get your body moving would be active transportation, and then the close cousin would be,
I guess, even some even motorized things would be considered active transportation, I think, like those e-scooters or electric wheelchairs probably count as well.
Yeah, e-bikes as well, I suppose.
Yeah.
Oh, that reminds me of something. We've had this issue, and we have it every year. We have it again this year. Motorized dirt bikes in parks and on pathways, they are not allowed in city parks. They are not allowed on the Trans-Canada Trail. They are not allowed on the pathways behind homes. They are not allowed on the grounds of Sacred Heart High School, on the field, or in the kind of the bowl area in front. If residents see that, please call 911. They are often damaging city park property, which is very expensive to repair and maintain. And they could also be putting people in danger. There's a very good reason we don't mix motorized vehicles and pedestrians and non-motorized cyclists on pathways. So please call 911 because it is a danger. And as you can imagine, it's very hard for police to enforce dirt bikes. So we'd appreciate help from the community to help us locate time and locations where this is happening.
We have no current questions. I encourage, if you're just tuning in, this is a Q&A with Councillor Gower. He will answer any question you have about Stittsville. In the meantime, I'll just dive into questions that I see in my inbox that drop in every now and then.
Okay.
We get a lot of questions about dog parks and where people can bring their dogs and what the rules are at specific parks, and if we're going to have new dog parks in Stittsville. So, Glenn, where can people bring their dogs in Stittsville parks, and what are the rules?
Yeah, I bet you more people have dogs and more people have this question because, there was a pandemic thing where more people brought dogs into their families, which is nice. First of all, if you go onto the city's website, you can search for dog parks and you will see a list and a map of dog parks in the Stittsville area. And in fact, I think we have a blog post drafted and ready to be published specific to Stittsville. There are not any fenced dog parks in Stittsville, but there are several parks that have off-leash areas where you're allowed to run your dog as long as they're under control and not causing any issues. And of course, you need to pick up after your pet. That's important. We do have Shea Woods. Shea Woods is a right now private property owned by a developer, CRT, Claridge Richcraft Tartan, or Tamarack. I always forget what the T. Tartan, thank you. And they currently own Shea Woods. We are getting very close to finalizing a purchase agreement to take that under city control. Right now, people use that informally as a dog park, but it's the city's intention to complete that purchase and turn it into a formal, recognized dog park. It'll likely have some fencing around that as well. And then there's a number of locations with hydro corridors in Stittsville that I think would be great locations for dog runs. The problem is the hydro companies, Hydro One and Hydro Ottawa, aren't so keen at encouraging recreational use in these hydro corridors. But there's a few locations, and there's one in particular just south in the south part of Stittsville. I guess it's really the north of Ward 21, not technically part of Stittsville, where I'm hopeful we can get a fenced dog area built and constructed in the near future. I also think there's some areas along the edge of the Greenbelt over along Eagleson that would be really good as well, that are not really prime agricultural area and are kind of underused spaces, and maybe those would be some good spots for a dog run. But definitely something we need more of in Stittsville and Canada and Ottawa in general, although the task of converting an existing park to a dog run is not an easy one. You might be able to sympathize with residents who live nearby. They don't necessarily want to see their local park converted into a fenced dog run. So it's a difficult task to start changing existing parks. So I think we need to look at new opportunities to designate as dog runs and fenced in or areas.
Fenced in off-leash dog areas.
Very confused. Yeah, very confusing terminology. Yeah.
Another question I see a lot is there's so much development happening in Stittsville. Places are turning into subdivisions and new homes being built all the time. And it's not always clear what is going on. People will email our office and ask, what's the plan for this lot behind my house? Or I just saw some trees being cleared, or there's a vacant lot surrounding a subdivision that doesn't seem to be touched. How do people find out about what's going on in terms of development, and who can they speak with, and where can they find answers?
Well, there's a few resources. Let me start by showing you something on my website here. All right. Are you seeing that, Jordan?
Yes, it's your website.
Yes. So on the top, there's this tab for development. And if you click on development, you will see a map. So this rotating square here is the map of development. That's a pretty overwhelming map. Now, some of these are development files already approved. Some of them are development files that are actively going through the approval process. And some of them are files that are on hold or have expired and just are lingering there as a record. But you can log in and see any property in Stittsville or the surrounding areas. We have a number of active development files in Stittsville, and there's even some on the outskirts. There's a recent one at 5331 Fernbank Road, and there's a recent one near Tanger Outlets that have just recently been published. And if you scroll down here, you can see the entire list of active developments in our area. And then we have a summary of all of the most recent developments that's included here, as well as if we're holding a public meeting, we'll note the dates and details of that public meeting. We're doing most of those by Zoom right now. And where we can, or where we're allowed to, for privacy reasons, we post a video from that, from each of the meetings as well. So lots of good resources. The other thing you can do is you can call 311 and you can ask to speak with a DIO, a Development Inspection Officer. And these are staff in the planning department who are educated and aware of all of the zoning around you and can help answer questions. Like if you're planning to buy a home or invest in a property and you're wondering what the zoning is or what you can or can't do, that's a good resource, the DIO. DIOs, you can also call them if you're planning to do something on your property, like building a deck and you're not sure if the zoning allows for it, or if you are planning to widen your driveway. Check with the DIO to make sure you're actually allowed to do that, because there's often some restrictions and conditions around that. You can also email me, and it's usually me or Jordan who will respond to that. If you've got a question about future development or what's happening, my team and I can help track down some answers for you.
Okay, I have a question from a resident.
All right.
It actually came in a few minutes ago and I didn't see it. It turns out there's a fourth place that I should have been checking. Anyway, this is a question about Robert Grant Avenue. Are there any plans to widen Robert Grant Avenue south of the school? And I will extend that question. Are there plans to extend Robert Grant north of that school?
Yeah, you know what I should find? I should find my handy transportation map. All right, I'm going to go into my email. I have a folder for Transportation Master Plan, which is the city policy department that, or city policy area that dictates when things are going to be built and how they're going to be built. And there's a transportation map. Now this is old. This map dates back to 2013, and we're actually going through a whole process right now to update this. Because 8 years, a lot's changed over 8 years. All right, can you see that, Jordan?
Yes, it's the Future Plan Projects and Rapid Transit map.
So Robert Grant, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but right now it runs from Fernbank to Abbott. And then it's going to be built in phases all the way up to, if you follow this yellow mustardy line here, all the way up to the Palladium Drive and the Queensway. That's the planned route for Robert Grant Avenue. It's going to be built in phases. So the first step is to get Robert Grant built out in its current 2-lane configuration. The next stage is going to be Hazeldean to Abbott, probably within the next 2 to 3 years. I'm hoping as quickly as possible. And then the rest of it to happen probably within the next 5 to 7 years. Again, we're trying to make that happen sooner because it's a much needed transportation project. It'll be 2 lanes from top to bottom when initially built. There are plans though to widen it for bus lanes. This is the planned bus rapid transit route. So adding dedicated bus lanes to either side. And eventually it could be widened to 2 lanes for regular vehicle traffic plus a bus lane. So if you can think of Robert Grant right now, the corridor, the width of space for the road is very, very large with large boulevards and median. And that's because there's lots of space reserved for future expansion if need be. So 2 lanes to begin, and then bus rapid transit lanes. And then after that, if it's needed, it could be widened to 4 lanes, but that all depends on future transportation patterns and the mix of people who are driving, people who are taking transit, active transportation, and of course, budget that would be available.
So it's something like you'd see a transit way kind of running down the middle and then traffic lanes on the side, or some configuration like that where it'd be dedicated bus rapid transit lanes that are separate than the general traffic.
Yes, that's right. So it could be the buses in the middle or it could be the buses on the side. And that those bus lanes, by the way, would run from Fernbank to Hazeldean, because at Hazeldean, they'd meet up with the future LRT station, because that's the end of the line for phase 3 LRT. And then I suppose, like looking way into the future, this would be decades, you'd also have that corridor space where if someday you wanted to extend LRT all the way to Fernbank, then you could convert those bus lanes into rail lanes. But that is way off in the future and like a figment of our imagination for the most part right now. We just need to get Robert Grant built first. We can talk about extensions of light rail after that's done. We've got a lot of work to do on that front. Can I go back to a sec about dogs? Talking about frequently asked questions. There are still a lot of dog owners in our community who do not pick up after their dogs. So if you're one of those people watching today, you could you could make a lot of your neighbors a lot happier if you pick up after your pet. And that makes me think of another issue we have is just around in parks. We have a lot of garbage containers that fill up with dog waste and bags of household waste, like people who take their kitchen garbage and put it in a park garbage. Please don't do that. The park garbage is meant to be for park use. And in fact, even your dog waste, you can bring it in a bag and put it in your green bin. And that's the best way to dispose of it, because those waste bins are emptied every week or twice a week, depending on the park. But even if the dog waste is sitting there for a few days, it can get incredibly smelly. It can attract bugs and rats and so on. It's a very big health issue. We're actually going to pilot in a few weeks at 2 or 3 parks in Stittsville, still to be determined. We're going to pilot a carry in, carry out garbage system. So we're actually going to remove the garbage bin and encourage people to take their waste home with them. So we're going to see how this works. And it's something that's been tried at some other parks and has worked well. And if you are someone who goes to some of the provincial parks, like say Algonquin Park, we do have a carry in, carry out there. It's just a way to remind people, encourage people to take responsibility for their waste and try to keep the parks as pleasant as possible for the people who use them, especially kids,
Okay, I got another resident question for you.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna introduce the question, and I'm gonna try and pull up the map while you're delivering your answer at the beginning.
Okay.
The question is, are there plans to include Edenwild in your ward?
Oh, yeah. So Edenwild is just south of Fernbank Road. And although the area around Hartsmere is part of Stittsville, Edenwild is part of Ward 21, Rideau Goulburn. And the Traditions 2 neighborhood, which is along Parade Drive, is also not part of Stittsville officially. However, recently City Council approved an update to the ward boundary map. And it means that that suburban part of Edenwild and Traditions will become part of Stittsville as of the 2022 election. So there are a few little tweaks here and there around our community. Some other neighborhoods, some other wards had bigger ones, but the major change is rightfully so, those homes along Parade and in Edenwild will be part of Stittsville soon. Do you have that map? I'm trying to extend out my answer for you.
That was perfect timing. I have the map. Let me just pull it up 1 second here.
I probably need to give you permission to share. There you go.
Oh. Okay, that was quick.
So right now, we are Ward 6, Stittsville. Used to be Stittsville-Canada West, but we're Ward 6, Stittsville. I don't know if the numbers make any difference to residents. It certainly is a big deal at City Hall number-wise, but it's likely the numbering of the wards will change. So Stittsville's Ward 6, Canada North is Ward 4, Rideau Goulburn is Ward 21, Canada South is Ward 23, I believe. There's really no rhyme or reason for how they numbered all these, but we'll probably see our number change. So this is, what are we looking at here, Jordan?
So this is the south end of Stittsville Ward. You can see Edenwild here if you can see my cursor. Yeah. This purple line is the existing ward boundary. And this blue line will be the future ward boundary. And I'll just cycle through these 2 layers to make it easy to understand.
Oh, I see.
This is the future. So you can see it goes and it includes the Edenwild area. And then the old one.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense because we get emails from people who live like along Parade and in Edenwild with questions, and I forward them to Councillor Moffat because it's in his ward, but it totally makes sense. I mean, people live here and shop here and consider themselves part of the Stittsville community. So we will be very happy to officially have you within Stittsville Ward.
And when would that be happening?
2022, November 2022.
For the next election.
Yeah. That's a great resource, by the way. If Geo Ottawa, a really, really interesting map, City of Ottawa map that you can explore all sorts of layers of information to explore the city.
It has far more layers than you could possibly imagine.
Do you have a favorite layer,
everything,
Jordan?
The layer I typically use the most is the property parcels layer and the zoning resources layer. I could show you what that looks like, but it's pretty easy. You'll just click specific boxes and it will show you all the information about the whole area of the city that you need for that certain thing. It includes, you know, street, road information, cycling infrastructure, the community design plan borders, all your water intake, rail, topographic area, floodplains,
when your garbage
canopy.
When your garbage gets picked up, you can get that.
Yeah, I think you can get where sidewalks and streetlights are located.
Historical satellite photos. That's good to look. You can look.
You can go all the way back to 1928, I think, for historical photo from aerial photos. Although it doesn't cover the whole city, those aerial photos, mostly just the core when you get back that early in time. But yeah, it's a good resource for that too.
Yeah.
Let me check the comments again.
Okay. While you're doing that, I wanted to talk about a frequently asked question about Alexander Grove this spring and summer. We've been having a lot of issues around vandalism, damage to the park, a couple incidents of harassment. And back when provincial restrictions forbade it, we had a lot of large gatherings of youth in the afternoon. Just want to let residents know that we have had Ottawa Police and Ottawa Bylaw proactively patrolling that park, sometimes on a daily basis, as well as some nearby parks as well. Coyote Run Park's another one. I know there's often some hangouts, you know, discarded furniture that's in the woods, and Bylaw has been out trying to clean that up promptly, cleaning up any graffiti or damaged equipment. I am hopeful that as the restrictions relax and young people in our community can get back to what they're used to doing as young people, getting together with friends, going to see a movie, that there'll be less of a reason to hang out like this at the parks. We're also convening a meeting of some community leaders next week, I believe, or the week after. I'd really like to see some kind of community drop-in center for youth or resources for youth. I think Johnny Lewer Arena has that great community hall upstairs. Maybe that's a location we could use. But I think we really need more support, more activities, more things for young people to do. I'm not suggesting it's acceptable to damage park equipment or vandalize or any other kind of illegal activity, but I am sympathetic that there's not really a lot for kids to do in our community. I think we could take more responsibility as community leaders and as residents to provide more resources. I also really want to encourage residents, keep walking through the parks, keep walking your dog, keep going out recreationally during the day, at night. Be present, be the eyes and ears out there. That's how we're going to keep parks in our community safe. The more people using these, the less attractive it is for a place for people to hang out who might not be up to constructive activities. And if you do see something, call 311. If it's a crime in progress, call 911, and that helps direct our bylaw and police resources appropriately as well. Okay, it's 12:54. Okay. I have no live outstanding questions. Well, I have one other request for residents, and it's around the issue we're having with speeds and stop sign violations here in Stittsville. Last night around 9 o'clock, 9:30, I was walking down Abbott Street, listening to podcasts and out for an evening walk when it was a bit cooler. And I saw a car coming down Iber Road, turning onto Abbott and not even slowing down at the stop sign. And, you know, I was about 30 seconds myself from crossing the street. So I'm sure many residents would have a story like this, a near miss, or you just go, what are people thinking? We are deploying a lot of traffic calming in the community. We did our first round back in the spring, and there's more coming over the course of this year. Police are out there enforcing. I did see they were out on Cope Drive doing enforcement in an area where we've seen a lot of issues, but they're in our community every day. I do want to ask residents to please make a report when you see a vehicle with excessive speed or a vehicle that is not stopping at a stop sign. Go to ottawapolice.ca/report. I've been asking police, and I'm certainly advocating on the community's behalf for more enforcement here, but police do use this reporting system, and they look at the data to see where they're getting the most reports and complaints about traffic infractions from, and that's where they'll dedicate additional resources. I was also really glad to see that the province now has significantly increased the fines and the length of time that police can impound vehicles who are stunt driving. That's a big issue in our community, and police are out every weekend handing out dozens of tickets across Ottawa for stunt driving. Unfortunately, we're still seeing repeat offenders, so I'm really not sure how that message doesn't get through. But also, just take responsibility yourself. I know it's maybe easy for people to get into autopilot mode and not realize how fast you're going. If you're traveling above 40 kilometers on a local street, you do not have time to stop for a kid who's running into the street, for a pet who might be running into the street. You do not have that reaction time. So please slow down, respect the signage and the speed limits, and help to keep our community safe. And the other thing I'll add is photo radar, which has been really effective in some school zones as part of a pilot project, is being expanded likely this fall to some more school locations across the city. I'd really like to see it expanded to other safety areas like in front of parks or community centers as well. I think it can make a difference, and all of the money from the fines from those speed cameras gets put back into safety initiatives. So it's makes our streets safer as a result. I think we should wrap it up soon because an hour flies by. Do we have any other resident questions?
We have no other resident questions. So yeah, I think you can wrap it up. Weekend plans, great spots to visit in Stittsville as people emerge from their homes.
Well, a reminder I said off the top, the Stittsville Front Porch Concert Series is tonight. And I'm really glad to see also on weekends, we're seeing garage sales pop up and lemonade stands and, you know, all these great community events, the little things that make it a positive experience to live in a community starting up again as the restrictions relax. I know restaurants can have indoor seating starting this weekend, so I hope people can support a local restaurant and support a local business. They're all really struggling, and we need a healthy business community here in Stittsville to be a healthy community. So, yeah.
And of course, if you haven't been vaccinated, get vaccinated. There are appointments and walk-ins, and shots are available all over the place.
Yeah, you can walk into Canadian Tire Center and get a first dose of the vaccine if you haven't done so. And if you need a second dose and it's been 28 days since your first, there are lots of appointments available at community clinics and at pharmacies. So go to ontario.ca and you'll find all the information how to sign up.
I know Ontario just passed 50% of all eligible, or all Ontarians, not just eligible Ontarians, which is a big milestone. So it'd be nice to get that even higher.
Oh, that's great. And in my family, as of tomorrow, everyone eligible, the teenagers, the adults, grandma and grandpa, everybody will be fully vaccinated as of tomorrow. So that's good news. And I hope other families are celebrating that milestone as well.
Okay, there were no last minute questions.
Okay, well, maybe the next one we'll do in the evening because that seems to generate more resident questions. But thank you, Jordan, for coming armed with lots of good questions for me. And a thank you to everybody who has tuned in. I can see we've got a lot of people watching. And if you ever have a question, you can send me an email, glen.gower@ottawa.ca. And I hope to see you at our next Councillor Chat. Take care. Bye.